Hello, this is Anna Sanderson, the Grant Program Manager, and my colleague Rachel Patterson, the Director of Programs for Diversity, will cover the key components of the application for the Diversity Pipeline Research Grant Program.
Key application components, goals, objectives, and outcomes. The next several slides will focus on these three areas as they're the biggest parts of the application and they're the biggest areas where many applicants struggle. Please note that content pertaining to the evaluation portion of the application will be addressed in a separate presentation. Please also note that the real key is that if after the letter of inquiry stage you are invited to submit a full application, make sure you include a fully formed evaluation plan. We need to have a strong sense of who is completing your evaluation, what key research questions are that you're hoping to answer, and what forms of assessment you will utilize, and so on. But for the purposes of this presentation, we will focus on goals, objectives, and outcomes. Goals. There are several areas where applicants tend to struggle the most on their application. Many program proposals simply try to take on too much in a finite period of time. This is the case when the size and scope of the proposed programming is unrealistic given the number and availability of support staff. Sometimes we have what I call the expert problem. Just because someone has attended law school does not mean that person is best suited to advise students on the law school admissions process. A third issue is that applicants often struggle to clearly and intentionally identify and distinguish their goals, objectives, and outcomes. I want to spend some time talking about the differences between these various categories. Goals are broader than objectives or outcomes. Let's take an example outside of legal education. Let's say you are a high school junior point guard with mediocre skills who loves the game of basketball. Your goal might be to be in the NBA one day or to play Division I college basketball. Those are big, overarching goals. But there are some intermediate hurdles you have to overcome along the way in order to get there. You may have to improve your jump shot. You may have to improve your speed. Those are some of the objectives you'll need to achieve in order to achieve your ultimate goal, which leads us to our objectives. Objectives are student-centered, and while not required, we encourage you to think about framing those objectives by stating, students will be able to. Objectives are clearly defined achievements that, as met along the way, lead to the program attaining its primary goals. We encourage you to think about framing your objectives by continuing to ask, what will students be able to do? Maybe they'll be able to compare and contrast. They'll be able to list. They'll be able to describe. They'll be able to explain, identify, critique. Bloom's taxonomy is a really helpful tool that we encourage you to utilize as you create your student-centered objectives. Bloom's taxonomy refers to levels of thinking, and so you want to make sure that your student-centered objectives cover the range that is available to you within Bloom's. At the bottom of the pyramid in Bloom's, those types of objectives require lower order thinking. Students are charged with remembering, recalling, describing, explaining. At the height of the pyramid, right at the highest point of the pyramid, students are being charged with creating, evaluating, analyzing, comparing, and contrasting. As you know, in legal education, the information that you have to be able to recite and to grapple with falls within all levels of Bloom's. And so you want to make sure that you are charging with your students with questions and with content that falls within the range that Bloom's taxonomy offers. Outcomes. How will you measure your outcomes? What tools will you utilize? What types of assessment will you incorporate? Your goals and objectives will inform the outcomes you hope to see for your students. When students complete your program, what do you want them to have achieved? Do you want them to have applied to law school, taken the LSAT, improved their scores, and if so, by how many points? Matriculate to law school? Do you anticipate there might be some attrition? If so, account for that. How will you measure success? If you are providing an LSAT course or LSAT tutoring, what is the average amount of improvement you hope or anticipate your students will have during that time frame? If you're providing mentoring opportunities, how many times do you want students to meet with their mentors? If you're providing one-on-one support with the law school admissions process, how frequently do you want students to meet with their advisors? What do you anticipate the results will be? When students complete your program, what do you want them to have achieved? Do you want them to have applied to law school, taken the LSAT, and improved their scores? A well-considered evaluation plan is critical to understand what is working and what can be improved in your program. On your application, make sure that you indicate which outcomes can be measured during the period of performance and which outcomes can be measured outside of the period of performance. Final thoughts. Ensure that distinct content is provided in the sections devoted to goals, objectives, and outcomes. So often, with applications, we see duplicative content. And while the content in each of those three sections is related, it should be substantively different. Take the time to think through what you ultimately want to accomplish with this program and what systematic steps you can take to do so effectively. Identify other experts in your building to assist you as you work through this application. Refer to the grant application website for more extensive information, and please send all questions to grants@accesslex.org.